Hi, so this is just a brief video to give you an overview of how to use the OSCOLA method of legal citation when you're writing an essay in a law school. So a lot of law schools in the United Kingdom use this system of referencing. So hopefully parts of this video will be helpful for you. This video is going to focus in particular on secondary sources, and I'll record a separate video to deal with primary sources. So looking at OSCOLA is a really useful system in the sense that once you know how to use it, uh, it should become instinctive, and it will become something that's quite easy to use. A real just general rule of thumb in relation to OSCOLA is that it's trying to keep punctuation and the number of characters that you use to a minimum. And the reason for that is basically to keep all of this additional material as brief as possible. And if you think about it, for every full stop or every additional character that you have to write, that's adding on to the length of an essay, or because OSCOLA is also relevant for writing books too, that can add on to the length of a book. And for a publisher, for example, that's publishing things like books, that costs them quite a lot of money for each page they print. So if there's a way that they can reduce the number of pages that they can print, then the happier they're going to be. So by trying to keep things like punctuation and the number of characters to a minimum, it's trying to simplify and shorten the overall process. And so for some examples in relation to OSCOLA, when you're referring to like a page number or to a range of pages, you don't need to include the letter P or PP when referring to a range of pages when you're using OSCOLA. Quite simply, the number is just enough. Another way in doing this that OSCOLA does this as well is in relation to punctuations. Uh, and so, for example, OSCOLA doesn't use full stops when you're abbreviating, say, a journal article. So, for example, the Oxford Journal of Legal Studies becomes OJLS, not O.J.L.S. Now, a good thing about learning how to reference correctly is not only will it become instinctive and automatic as you progress, and so it'll eventually save you time. If you can reference correctly, it's going to cut down substantially on your word count. So say, for example, Oxford Journal of Legal Studies, that's 5 words right there. If you've realized that you're allowed to abbreviate that down to OJLS, you've reduced that down to 1 word. And again, if you're excluding things like P or PP before you write down the page number, think of all the times in every single footnote you use the letter P standing alone. That counts as a word. And if you can cut that out, then you're saving yourself a lot of word count that you can actually use on the body of your essay. So in general, keep it simple. And the key rule then with any form of referencing at all is essentially that you're consistent. And so long as you're consistent throughout, that's I think is one of the most important things. So in terms of the material that we're going to cover in this video, we're focusing primarily on secondary sources. So in law, secondary sources are kind of sources about the law rather than sources of the law itself. So we're talking about books and journal articles, and websites are kind of the 3 things I'm going to focus on because those are the 3 sources that you might use the most. So these might be academic books and journal articles where authors are writing about the law as distinct from the law itself, which is a primary source. So things like case law, legislation, treaties, they are all primary sources. They are the actual law, whereas secondary sources are sources about the sources of law. So hopefully that's clear. So we're going to focus on books, journal articles, and websites. So generally speaking as well, OSCOLA, hopefully you should see from a lot of your studies that OSCOLA is a footnote system. So law, we use footnotes. And the reason we do so in law is because we very often will pinpoint to a specific point in a text. And we will often refer to the same text on multiple occasions. And for that reason, then footnotes are much more appropriate than, say, a Harvard citation of Harvard citation of references, which you might have seen this in some of the things you read, which is just your source in brackets and then a bibliography at the end. Generally speaking, a Harvard citation system might only refer to that source once, and that might be some of the social sciences that do that kind of thing. But in law, because we're dealing with texts and we try and be as accurate as possible with the text, we will often refer to the same source multiple times, and for that reason then footnotes are more appropriate. And having the footnotes at the bottom of each page rather than at the end of the document means you're not constantly flicking forward and back. So in terms of citing a book then in your footnotes, OSCOLA, looks for some key information. And again, it's trying to keep things as simple and as short as possible. So the first thing is OSCOLA looks for is obviously the author's name. Okay, author or author's name. It then looks for the name of the book in italics. It looks for the edition, and that's normally only if there's like a second edition on. It looks for the publisher, and it looks for the date of the publication. And those are the kind of key issues. And then we also look for a page number if you're pinpointing to a specific point in a book. Okay, and again, because we're lawyers, we're trying to be as accurate as possible in pinpointing the text that we're referring to. Ideally, you would be including page numbers. Importantly, unlike some reference systems, OSCOLA doesn't require you to tell us where the location of the book is published. OSCOLA doesn't care about that. So if your book is published in Oxford, if it's the Oxford University Press that you want to cite, you don't need to write Oxford and then Oxford University Press. And again, there you go, you're saving word count by excluding this kind of material that OSCOLA is not interested in. In terms of how to format or write the name, some authors will use their abbreviated name, so they won't actually be known by their first names, etc. They'll use initials like J.R.R. Tolkien, for example, J.K. Rowling. Okay, generally speaking, OSCOLA basically, again, it's simple. It's like you cite the author's name the same way that it's written in the source. So if it's A.V. Dicey written in the book, you write A.V. Dicey. You don't need to write Albert Venn Dicey. Likewise, you can go H.L.A. Hart, for example. You don't need to spell out his full name. So just keep it simple. Whatever's written there in the book, you do that the same. If they use initials, you can use initials. Okay. So just to give you an example, just to use, say, for here's kind of one of my books, just to show you how you would cite this. I've highlighted the kind of key information that OSCOLA looks for in this. So firstly, the title of the book that you're going to need to include, and then the subtitle as well underneath that. Then you have the author's name, which is my own name. Then we're looking for the publisher, and then we're looking for the date of the publication. So those are the key information, and you can find that on the book itself and on the inside then of the book, where you'll have all this relevant information. You can also find it on websites. So very often you do a Google search for the book and you'll be able to pull up the book, maybe on its publisher's homepage, and you can find all that relevant information there. We don't need to know that it's published in Oxford. No need to include that. So the way this citation would look like, it's the name, it's the title of books in italics, and that's really the only thing in OSCOLA that goes in titles. In italics is kind of the title of a book. There's the publisher, which is Hart Publishing, and then there's the year. And you put the publisher and the year inside round brackets. If we're citing to a specific page, then after that we would put the page number. So hopefully you can see it's relatively straightforward. Some books might have additional detail required. So let's say if it's an older edition of a book. So a good example here is Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan, which is from like the 1600s. If you're to cite an older work, it might be helpful for you to give the date of original publication, and you might do that within the brackets before the publication date of the current edition. So, for example, in relation to this book by Thomas Hobbes, it's the exact same as the previous example, except you put in first published 1651. Some books might have editors' names, some book might have translators' names. That goes the same inside those brackets there. And if you look at the bottom of the video, I've included a link to both the general OSCOLA guide and also the OSCOLA quick reference guides. That gives you some further clarification in relation to that. A further source that you might look at is what's known as an edited collection. So this is a book that has got each chapter is written by multiple different authors, and then you'll have an overall editor or team of editors that's brought all this together. So you might see those quite often in law. So again, the rules are the same. We look for the author's name as it appears, and then we're looking for the author. We're looking for the name of the chapter in question. Then we're looking for the name of the editors. The name of the book goes in italics. Then you're looking for the publisher, the year of publication, and the page number. So an example here here's an edited collection known as Security and Human Rights. And this is the second edition of this book. And this is edited by Benjamin J. Gold and Leora Lazarus. And let's say we want to cite this article here by Lucia Zedner, which is known as Curtailing Citizenship Rights as Counterterrorism. So how do we cite this? Well, okay, so we have the author's name at the start here, Lucia Zedner. Then we have the title of her chapter inside single inverted commas, as Curtailing Citizenship Rights as Counterterrorism. And then then we have the editors, so Benjamin J. Gold and Leora Lazarus, brackets eds to demonstrate that we're looking for editors. Then the title of the book in italics, Security and Human Rights. Then we have it's the second edition. It's hard publishing, it's 2019, and it starts at page 99. I've just noticed that I've forgotten to close the single inverted commas around curtailing citizenship rights as counterterrorism. So we all get it wrong sometimes. So I've missed that one, and I probably should go back and fix that. And if I were doing my proofreading correctly, I would have flagged that up. So there you go. We're all human. But hopefully you can see then that's the kind of information that we're looking for. Moving on then to journal articles. The key thing for a journal article, again, that OSCOLA is looking for is the author's name or author's name in the same form as the publication. So it's the same rules. We want the article title inside single inverted commas. We want the year of publication. And that's going to be inside round brackets or square brackets, depending upon what is appropriate. I'll talk about that in the next couple of slides. We need the volume number and we need the issue number. And then we get the journal title as well. And OSCOLA, as I said, if you go to the OSCOLA guide, you will see that there are a list of there's a table of abbreviated journal titles that you can use. And that will save your word count. Like I said, rather than writing Oxford Journal of Legal Studies, just write OJLS. Then we're looking for the start page of the article. And then we're also looking for the pinpoint page. So if you're referring to a particular quote or a particular argument in that article, you would want to go to the specific page as well. Again, we're lawyers. We're trying to be as accurate as possible here. So again, to give you an example for one of my pieces of work, so this is Defining Terrorism, One Size Fits All, and it's in the International and Comparative Law Quarterly, and it's in the 2017 year, volume 66 in April. So the way you would cite that then is it's the name, then it's the journal title inside inverted commas, and then it's the year inside round brackets, the volume 66, it's the second issue because it's from April, and then instead of writing International and Comparative Law Quarterly, which would be 5 words, you can just go ICLQ, and then we just look for the page 411. You don't need the PP there for that, and then you might be referring to the specific page. Then you would include that as well. A thing I've noticed in recent years students doing is if they access an article online, they include the URL to that article too. And I think that comes from basically equating a journal article with how you cite a website. You don't need to do that if the journal has a hard copy, and most journals, you can assume that it does. You don't need to include the URL. And again, that's a waste of word count if you're including that. So don't include that kind of material. It's not necessary. So, and like I said, OSCOLA allows you to abbreviate journal titles. And if you go to page 46 and 47 of the OSCOLA guide, you will see a list of abbreviated journal titles that you are allowed to use. There's no full stops in between each journal title. So you can just go on ahead and just say, for example, write legal studies as LS rather than L.S. And think about if all the citations you're doing throughout your piece of work, if you're able to abbreviate them down to this, that's saving you so much word count that you can put actually into the body of your text. Now, I mentioned there about square brackets or round brackets. So this is a very niche kind of little thing, but it's important to kind of know, well, just in terms of being consistent and having an understanding behind it, so you don't need to think about it now that you know. So when you're writing a date of a source, do you use square brackets or do you use round brackets? And chances are you have seen both written down when you've looked at various sources. The thing, what a difference between a square bracket and a round bracket is that a square bracket tells you that the date is absolutely necessary in order for you to be able to find the source. So usually cases, very often, and I'll have a separate video on primary sources, but usually cases will be inside square brackets because it's the year is required for you to find that case. So if we look at the case of Evans and Attorney General, so a famous public law case from 2015. So the citation is 2015 UK Supreme Court 21. If you didn't know the year of 2015, it's going to be hard for you to find that case. So the square brackets tells you that you need the date to find the source. You can contrast this with round brackets. And in contrast, round brackets are basically, they're telling you the date, but they're also telling you that you can find that source even if you don't know the date. And usually you will see a round bracket with journal articles, because very often journal articles will have a volume number in addition to the date. So if we look at that previous example of the International and Comparative Law Quarterly from 2017, the information of that was also that it was published in the 66th volume. And so even if you didn't know the year 2017, you do know that it's the 66th volume. And so you can find that source even without the year. So the round brackets tell you that the date is not necessary to find the source. And usually if you have a volume number, then you will put the year inside round brackets. Okay, that's a general rule of thumb. But not all journals do have volume numbers. So for example, public law. Public law doesn't have volume numbers, it only has years. So if you're citing the journal Public Law, then if we wanted to find this article by Paul Craig, the Supreme Court Prorogation and Constitutional Principle, that's in the Public Law that was published in 2020. Okay, there's no other information that we can use to find that source other than 2020. There's no volume. And so for that reason, we use square brackets rather than round brackets. Okay, so again, it's just a small little things, but if you can consistent and you know how to do it, then you don't need to think about it in future. It becomes automatic. Final source to look at are online sources. So things like blogs and news websites, etc. We're seeing a lot more of these sources being used today, particularly blogs, and particularly in the area of public law. So, after the Brexit referendum, where things were changing so fast, lawyers didn't have time, and academics didn't have, if we were to publish journal articles, which eventually we did, but the law was moving so fast that we needed to get things out there much quicker. during COVID as well, for example. So things were published, a lot of things were published in blog form, and blogs have really taken off in recent years in legal academia and academia generally. So how do you cite these sources? Same as the other things. So authors or author's name in the way that they're given in the source. We're looking for the title of the work. We're looking for the publisher in italics. We're looking for the date of the publication. And then we're looking for the website or URL inside these angle brackets, so the greater than and less than angle uh, uh, signs. And then we're looking for the date accessed. And the date accessed is important because very often, because the internet is a ever changing thing, very often links can die. So by including the date access, you're demonstrating, okay, this is when I most recently cited it. I'm saying that it was in existence on this such a date. So it's important to include that information. So if we take, say, the Guardian website, for example, and so here's an article, uh, and we're trying to figure out how we would like to cite this in an essay. So we're looking, if you remember, we want the author's name and we want the article title, we want the publisher, we need the date of publication, we need the website URL, and we need the date accessed. So the way I would write that is, so there's the name, there's the article title, and then inside brackets I have the publisher in italics. So I have the Guardian in italics and the date that it was published. You can see it there at the bottom left hand corner, the 1st of October 2024. And then that's inside, it should be inside the greater than or less than signs. Again, the greater the angle at the start is missing, and I think that's because when I hit enter initially, sometimes you'll notice with Microsoft Word or Microsoft programs that if when you put in a URL inside these brackets and you hit enter or hit space, it will delete the bracket for you and create a hyperlink. So I went back and put in one of the brackets, but I missed that the other one had been deleted as well. So again, apologies for that. We're not, we're all making mistakes on this as well. Uh, so two mistakes in a citation video essay. So when we're marking people for OSCOLA, generally speaking, I will not. When I'm personally marking, I don't punish people for not having commas here and there. The key thing is that you're consistent, and the key thing is that you actually do cite a source, that you're backing up what you say uh, with evidence, and that you're also giving appropriate credit for the person who's done the work. Those are the key things that we're looking for, rather than this kind of focusing on making sure every full stop and comma is in the correct position. Really, the key thing is if you learn how to do it and you're consistent, then you won't need to think about it, and then that was going to make your life so much easier. So just to conclude, then at the end of this URL, then we will have the date that it was most recently accessed. So hopefully this video has been useful in terms of just trying to figure out how to write secondary sources. Again, we're not all perfect. We will make mistakes. We need to obviously we have to proofread things. But really it's all about kind of trying to be as consistent as possible, and just being making sure that you are attributing correctly and giving people credit where credit is due, and demonstrating that you have research to back up what you're claiming. Those are the key points, okay? And like I said, it's all to try and save you time so that it becomes automatic, that you're not worrying and thinking about it. And this just takes practice, okay? And it will come with practice. So hopefully this has been helpful, and I will record and upload a video on how to cite primary sources, some of the key primary sources that you'll be using in a law degree. I've also included then at the bottom of this video just links to how to find to the OSCOLA complete guide, which is you'll see quite complicated, and also the very simple OSCOLA quick reference guide. And if you're a law student, like what I did, I'd advise you to print out the quick reference guide and stick it on a wall wherever it is that you do your study, and just that answers nearly 99% of all kind of reference queries. So hopefully you've found this video helpful. I've talked for quite a lot longer than I thought I would, so I will leave it at that. Thank you.